So after last week's episode, I had the thought that I wanted to talk about unworthiness because I see it as such a fundamental human condition, an issue that we all face. Because when we set out to move toward our dreams, our visions, or focusing on joy, a lot of times what blocks us are our feelings of unworthiness. So as I started to look at that, it was interesting because I ended up having an experience which took me even deeper than unworthiness. However, I do want to share with you about the unworthiness piece first. So what I have seen as a kind of a given with myself and with clients is that it's as if we've agreed to this experience of unworthiness in order to be a human, in order to incarnate on this planet. And we can look at, lots of reasons of why we might feel unworthiness in our life experiences or in how people treat us or, whatever. Maybe or even a birth defect, something that, we were born with that makes us feel like, oh, everybody else got this and I didn't. But what I see is that it's as if we wanted to come in to experience being human, and in order to do so, there was this little gatekeeper that says, hey, you can have an earth experience if you wish, but you do need to agree to unworthiness. And we're like, sure, I can do that. Sounds pretty doable. And then you sign the dotted line and come on in. But what I will say about unworthiness is that sometimes it is embedded in so deep because we've had lifetimes of experiences in which we really wanted to believe that we were unworthy. So perhaps in one lifetime we betrayed someone, and then in another lifetime we did some kind of horrible thing to somebody, or a group of people, or whatever. And so that feeling of unworthiness can build up, right? And of course, in our own lifetimes, I mean, if I look at, I would say 9 out of 10 people, if not more, when I look at their parenting, how they were parented, that in and of itself can create a lot of unworthiness. And this isn't to go into blame about how horrible people are or anything like that, but just simple things that we may unconsciously do to our children that we don't even recognize we're doing. And therefore they can feel unworthy, right? And so many times our parents may have done something to us consciously and, cruelly, but other times it's purely out of their own ignorance or lack of, experience perhaps. So anyway, unworthiness is a stumbling block for many of us to move toward that which we want. And what I found this week, earlier in the week, was there was something even deeper that sort of surprised me. So a few nights back, I had a dream. It was actually a nightmare that startled me awake. Once I'm awake, I often experience this zinging of the brain. I'm an air sign, and so my mind will just start going and trying to think of all the things I'm supposed to do, or all the things I should have thought of, or all the things that, who knows, somebody else didn't think of. I don't know. And so once awake, it's hard for me to just rest back into that slumber. And so anyway, I was in that state, and I think because of the dream had triggered me into fear, I started to do kind of a scan on myself to see what was going on, and started to look at my own patterning. And what I came up with was what I thought was going to be, oh, is this about unworthiness? And it wasn't. And I thought, okay, so what is this? And I scanned a little deeper. And what it showed me was unlovableness, right? That I had this utter feeling of being unlovable. And so I kind of looked back and I thought, well, isn't that the same thing? Aren't unworthiness and feelings of being unlovable basically the same? And I, heard, no, this is different. And that really shocked me in a sense, because I thought, really? Because I feel fairly confident. I feel that, sure, we have the same unworthiness that other people have. That's a human condition, and I can, work with it as it arises. But this utter feeling of being unlovable was just like, whoa. Now, what came to me and why I started to look at it was based on my own personal limitation, based on the things I don't have, whether it's finances or a kind of a life that I want, or even how I take care of myself. Generally I eat well, and generally I create environments that are health supporting, but in all honesty, it's like I don't move my body the way I would like to. I don't eat as well as I would like to. And I'm really tired of the whole financial crunch. And I'm also tired of my own stuff as it comes up when I get just like frustrated with everything in the world. And I just want to say, you know, screw all of you guys. I'm the only one that's sane, which we know is not true. But nonetheless, I go to those places. And so as I was looking at this in this, you know, middle of the night, trying to go back to sleep, but thinking I could use the time for something else, like self-evaluation, when the unlovability came up, it really hit me in a very big way, because what I saw was, it was not just that you're unworthy, let's cast you aside, but you're not even worth love. That you are unlovable. It's not that we don't want to give you love, it's that there's nothing about you to be loved, right? That you are unlovable. And that was huge. I have experienced those feelings in me before, but they're usually when I'm having a meltdown and feeling like, oh, the whole world doesn't support me. But to have it just really be sitting there quietly and underneath the unworthiness was pretty profound. So what I would like to do is explore this feeling and this experience and this fear or this belief somehow that we are unlovable. Yes, we are unworthy too, right? We've taken that on too, but let's look a little bit deeper at this feeling or this belief that we are somehow unlovable. I will say that this particular topic has been a little bit of a tight one for me. Generally speaking, when I see an area in someone else, I can see it in myself, but there's more of an objectivity to it as I'm doing my scanning. And with this particular issue around the unlovability, it feels like it's brought forth a lot of this stuff that's like, what am I supposed to do with all this? So it's been a little bit trickier to be more or less objective, but I will do my best to share with you what I am getting from an intuitive standpoint without having too much of it be so personal. All right. So in terms of this unlovability piece, what I'm seeing is that it is a form of unprocessed expression of lack. So let me clarify that a little bit. When we have an experience in our lives, when we are, you know, taking our first breath, for example, and we had been breathing, you know, this fluid that was so natural and easy for us, and then suddenly we emerge and it's like, and we have to kind of like, you know, gasp for this air that we, you know, haven't ever had to do before, it may feel as if there's some kind of a struggle, right? Now, as a human being, the human part of us has many reactions, and it's based on survival, really. These reactions get recorded into our little brains and, you know, get categorized because our brains are very dualistic. It's like good, bad, you know, and sometimes there's a, you know, in between, but generally speaking, it's like, which way is this expression or emotion or experience going to go? Is it going to go to, you know, being chalked up to being bad or what? As we have our experiences growing up and someone maybe looks at us wrong, or maybe we didn't get a toy for Christmas, or like I said in my first little snippet, something that is more overt and, you know, outright mean, it's hard for us not to take that personally, right? And what happens is we don't just feel unworthy, like, you know, I'm not good enough or whatever because of these experiences. But what starts to happen as we don't have the capacity, most often than not when we're young, to process what's going on, it ends up becoming more or less embedded in our psyche, and the feelings of being unlovable starts to grow. For me in particular, there are lots of instances in which I could remember, you know, why I might have felt unlovable. But what's interesting is my all my years of therapy and all of my self-conscious awareness hadn't really cleared that. And so that's what surprised me more than anything. I want to summarize this little piece by saying that 2016, and every day actually, but when I look at the patterns of what's coming in from this year that's ahead of us, is really bringing to the surface all of these wounds through experiences. Maybe we'll have a repeated experience that we go, I'm really tired of having this kind of experience, or through a trigger of some kind of emotion gets triggered, so that it can be brought to the surface for us to heal, to move through, to process. For me in particular, the two areas that I struggle with most, right, the story that I've created that I struggle with most, are around time and money. It's like, oh, I don't have enough time, I'm so busy. Oh, I don't have enough money, I've got to work more, I've got to do this. So those seem to be the patterns that emerge for me a lot. And so when I was having that scan and was looking deeper into what was going on around all of this stuff, it really showed me this picture of the unlovable piece that still is yet to be healed. I want to close with a couple of thoughts and even some tools. The first is that I've never liked the word process personally. For me, it makes me feel as if I'm this constant work that has to be looking at and making something better of something that was crappy, right? Me, and I don't like that. But rather, how I have taken in the word, how it helps me to use that word, or how I use it freely, I guess, is more with a neutral sort of energy. So rather than thinking of me as something wounded or broken or bad, and that it has to be turned into something better, I look at this whole idea of processing as simply learning to love and be with what is. For me personally, there is that resistance to not just criticism from others, but to self-criticism, because I am so harsh and so introspective and constantly kind of looking whether I mean to or not. And so if I were to spend all of that attention processing these things that I see, I would probably be working 24/7. And I would like to enjoy my life too, right? Just do those regular things like zoning out and taking naps and not doing anything at all. Nonetheless, what I was seeing earlier when I was speaking to what happens when we go into this place of unlovability is that when things start to build and we don't look at them, they become unconscious, and we don't have any recognition that they are really sort of a thorn in our side that isn't supporting us, right? It's festering and it's getting worse, and in fact it's pulling us down. The other thing I wanted to leave you with are some tools that work for me. And I'll start with, this idea of scanning. No, you don't have to do it in the middle of the night when you wake up and have better things to do like sleep. But I wanted to share with you how I do a scan. And it's, nothing in particular. It's just a general idea. So the first thing is to really get centered. And when I get centered, I usually go into my heart and just take a few deep breaths. And then I intend to have as much clarity as possible. I also intend to have neutrality, that I want to look at things with neutrality. I don't want to go in there with this little critical eye and make myself feel worse, because what would happen is I would clam up and say, don't look at that, right? And then I also want to offer myself an unconditional loving presence, to be just fully present wherever I can. So what I often do is there's two ways to scan. One would be quite methodical, in the sense that maybe start from the top and just imagine, this almost like an MRI, that you're going through this machine starting from the top to see what's there, what's coming up. The other would be to feel into or notice anything that's calling your attention. So if fear is calling your attention, you can just feel into your body. It's like, where is that fear? And as you maybe feel it, maybe tightness around the heart, you can feel into that area and say, okay, what's beneath that? And then the other thing I'll often do to get clarity, this is where the clarity comes in, is I'll ask questions. What is this? Just like I did with the unworthiness versus the unlovability. When I saw this piece about being unlovable, I thought, well, isn't that just worthiness? And I clearly heard, no, this is different. It's like, oh, okay. So I try not to judge the information that I get as, oh, who's saying that? Or I shouldn't have had that thought, right? I just really relax into it. So perhaps you want to practice this scanning and looking and experiencing whatever comes up. Now, I will say that the process doesn't have to be, writing it down, figuring it out, calling a therapist, anything like that. It could simply be a matter of just being with and observing it and keep asking questions. What is this? Oh, for me personally, if it starts to feel tight, then, and I'm tired like I was earlier this week, one thing I'll do is I'll be really patient and kind with myself and not expect me to look too deep. It's kind of like, how maybe you have a little bit of a splinter. Let's go to the splinter idea. And, you kind of get most of it, but you don't necessarily want to go digging around, because at some point it starts to get irritated and says, enough's enough. You can come back to get the rest of it later, right? So you can always come back and look at the rest later, and give your area, whatever that might be, time to settle down and not be so agitated. When you're looking, you're just looking openly. So you're not necessarily saying, okay, is this a physical pain? Maybe it is. But I just see that we have many different layers. And so what may start as something physical, if we keep looking into it, we may start to discover that it really comes from an emotional wound, or, there's the story or whatever else. If you don't want to play with this idea of doing any personal scan, that's fine too. It's just a tool that you can sort of look objectively and neutrally at what's going on with you without necessarily being taken off guard by something just showing up. But if something shows up, maybe that's just what you need too. And what I want to leave you with is, regardless of whether you scan and look for things, or they just pop up, or whatever's holding you back from whatever you want, whether it's this feeling of being unlovable or unworthy, that, regardless of all of that, you are absolutely 100% lovable and worthy, and that anything that is showing you or making you believe otherwise is simply untrue.